Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. It's good to be here with you at OC Talk Radio. And guess what, man?
What is it?
Our good friend Terry Hershey has just released a new book titled This Is the Life. I received a copy just a couple of days ago, so I've only read through it. I've read parts and of most of it, and it really is good. And I think the subtitle explains as much about the content and got me into it. And the full title reads, This is the Life, Mindfulness, Finding Grace, and the Power of the Present Moment. That's a good job. I know much has been written on mindfulness and living in the present, but Terry indeed does offer a fresh perspective on this subject. For me, it's not so much his book is not so much a how-to book as it is a why-to book. Would you agree with that, Terry?
Yeah, that's actually, I would agree with that.
Oh, good. And I found the book a most refreshing read, attempting to restore us from our frenetic, hectic, and chaotic daily lives. It is filled with stories, anecdotes, references to masters, especially in the spiritual world or in the spiritual arena. And by spiritual, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about otherworldliness. And personally, I'm attracted much by the notion of finding grace in the power of the present moment. But most of us reside in cities and suburbs that are inundated with a driving need to accomplish, to add value, to be forward-thinking. And then, unfortunately, our children are being raised to follow the same lifestyle. But I think I'm already giving away too much of our content or our discussion here. So for the few listeners that are not familiar with Terry Hershey, he is a most popular public speaker. In fact, I personally consider Terry to be one of the most enjoyable and impactful public speakers I have ever heard. He is obviously an author of quite a few books and a landscape architect, and probably most importantly, especially for the sake of our conversation today, Terry is avid gardener, is putting it lightly. He has a 2-acre garden in which he cares for diligently with great grace and great devotion. So, Hirsch, congratulations on the new book. It was such a pleasurable read.
Thanks. Yeah, it's like birthing a child, but it's and the thing about a book is you birth a child, but you don't really care whether it grows up. You're just thrilled.
I know it. I haven't published that many, and not nearly the way you do. But when you get that book in the mail, there really is something special to that, isn't there?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's a great.
Yeah, they did a great job with the title. That wasn't the title I had given them, but they did a great job.
They took it from Zach's quote, huh?
Yeah, my son. I was going to call the book Dancing with Manatees.
Yeah, that'd sell like hell. I mean, that would just be,
of course,
that's a great selling title.
I tell you what, though, here, because manatees, some people are thinking, what the hell's a manatee? A manatee is a large, like a walrus in the water.
I thought it was like a stingray.
No, a manatee is those massive, wonderful, gentle creatures.
Oh.
Yeah, the manatees are, they're very, very, very famous down in several places in Florida, and it's anyway. Dancing with Manatees. Because when I was young, my favorite book was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Right.
All right. So, and I thought, and one of the reasons I picked it up was because the title. The title is, I have no idea what this book is about. That's what I loved about the title. And so Dancing with Manatees was like my Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yeah, but I thought it was Dancing with Stingrays, and so I'm thinking shows my intelligence. Besides, I'll tell you, I'm curious, man. Apart from your love of writing, what was your motivation to write this particular book?
Actually, the episode of Dancing with the Manatees, which was a thing that in western Florida and the Gulf of Mexico had this episode, which is a surreal, serendipitous kind of thing, where you have this encounter with this manatee, and you get in touch with the giddiness, and it's always been a part of my message, my mantra, which is, I call it, I didn't make this up. It was made up in the 13th century by a priest, but the sacrament of the present moment. In other words, you take this moment and you invest it, you honor it, you invest it with gratitude and presence. And that's always been sort of my mantra that I've preached. But this Dancing with the Manatee things, I practiced it because there was no forethought to it. And then I had to unpack it, and I wrote, and the publisher had asked me to write a book and said, "What are you writing?" And I said, "This is it." And they said, "Well, we want to do it." So.
And that was when it was titled Dancing with Manatees.
Yeah.
See, they knew what a manatee was.
Right. They said, well, they had a meeting. They had a meeting with all the people, and they said, we love the title Dancing with Manatees, but there are people out there who think manatees are stingrays. And so we can't, in good conscience, use that title.
Yeah, I like This Is the Life.
Actually, it was brilliant. I love the subtitle.
Oh, the subtitle is tremendous.
It's about mindfulness. It's about finding grace. And it's about the power of the present moment.
Now, are we going to talk about those three things today?
It's your show, man. Because I'm in the present moment. But it's your show.
You're in the present moment, so I have to bring you. I have to bring you into my moment.
Well, sort of. It's about.
Well, I'll tell you, the challenge with this book, and is that you have taken head on an opposite view of the ultimate goal of the American dream, which is to accomplish things and to collect stuff. And accomplishment and collection of stuff is pounded into us from childhood. And unfortunately, today it seems to be magnitudes more invasive to children than it was when we were young decades ago. What do you think about that?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I want to tell you a story. The second thing that bombards us is the reality that I know you were saying in cities they're more tempted by that, but because we have the cell phone and other technology, we are distracted from the present no matter where we are. And the way you have to present yourself on social media is something, quote, other than who you really are, kind of, because you have to sort of put on airs, so to speak. And anyway, but what your question is about the, quote, American dream. So I want to read this to you because I was just writing this down. A friend just told me this, and this is going to be in my blog next week. You ready for this?
Yeah.
She said, "I wish I had read your Sabbath moment before my meeting." Now, my friend is a hospice chaplain. In other words, she's a chaplain that works with people who are dying. Okay?
Right.
She's brilliant at it. She's been doing it for years. She said, "I was just with my hospice supervisor, and her question to me was, 'What are your long-term goals?' She said, I wanted to laugh out loud because this woman was obviously reading from a chart that had to do with employees' goals and objectives, to your point, right?
Right.
In other words, what fits under this? This is my friend saying. My friend says, instead, I'm thinking, I'm 80 years old. I've just come through cancer, chemo, radiation. All right, I'd like to live just another year in my new house with my new garden that my friend helped me design. I would like to live just this year with grace and gratitude." That's what she's thinking. And so
why does it take? Why do we have to get old to understand that?
Well, that's what I love about this. And then she says this: all right, here's the deal. I don't have any long-term goals. I'm going to be a hospice chaplain, because I love the work I'm doing. When I stop loving it, then I will quit. That's my answer to your question.
That's great. That is, you know, I think we all, you know, I'm experiencing, you know, I'm taking over sort of a corporate culture endeavor here, and in a company that I'm working with, and I want people to, you know, I want them to have fun at work. I want them to enjoy the whole idea of coming to work every day, rather than this drudgery. I'm going to get yelled at. I'm going to get pounded on. I have to accomplish, or I have to, you know, how am I adding value? You know, the great new term.
So here's the thing. This is because one of the people say, "What's the book about?" And I would say, really, the book is a paradigm shift. Because if we live by the title of this book, then we're going to measure things differently. We're going to measure things like success differently. We're going to measure things like failure differently, and then we're going to ask different questions. In other words, we're going to engage differently. Like the woman, the chaplain, the question she wanted to ask is, "Tell me what you love about your work." Your long-term goals and objectives, that's fine if I have your checklist, but tell me what you love about your work, because I want to create an environment where that's what's happening. In other words, it changes the paradigm and therefore changes the question. We measure things very differently now.
And as a result, for the company that is in business not necessarily to be the happiness factor in people's lives, but to produce product, actually produces better product and better income with happy employees.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're in other words, I want that kind of person. I want the person that I'm engaged with at any endeavor to live from the philosophy, this is the life, because they're going to bring their best self to the day, to the moment.
But when you're right when you spoke of this as a paradigm shift, because we were talking a major paradigm shift. There is nothing taught to children to even begin to think that way. As a matter of fact, somewhere I read you wrote, I think it was in this book, and we've spoken of it before, about the teacher asking the children, what are the 7 wonders of the world?
Yes,
why don't you tell that story?
First graders, 7 wonders of the world, and they're all given it a shot. Pyramids and Niagara Falls, and the teacher's cheerleading them on. Those are pretty good answers, actually. And then one little girl says nothing, because there's always somebody that says nothing, and the teacher says, Emily, and Emily says, well, I don't think I understand the question. And the teacher says, why? And Emily says, because I don't have any of the right answers. And the teacher says, why don't you read what you've got, and we'll help you. See, there's the paradigm right there. I don't have any of the right answers.
Yes.
And so the little girl stands up and says, the 7 wonders of the world are to see and to hear and to taste and to touch and to smell.
My goodness, how does a first grader think of that? I mean, that's...
I'll tell you what. That's the thing, though, is that kids are born with that, and we wean it out of them. We raise them with the other paradigm.
Well, she must have been raised with the right paradigm, too, because she would have lost it by 6 years old if she was not parented by people who valued such things.
Yeah, I think, she would have lost it by 6 years old in Orange County, but up here it's not till you're 8 or 9. But, it gets weaned out of you. Absolutely.
It really does.
Because it doesn't take long before you're asked, what are you going to be when you grow up?
Oh, yeah, we were both asked that.
And what are you going to and where are you going to go to school, etc.
Well, not only where are you going to school, but here in Orange County, there are parents that are taking children that are screening preschool and kindergarteners for how can they better get them prepared for an Ivy League college. At preschool and kindergarten. Are you we're just totally screwing up these kids' lives.
So what's interesting is the permission, for example, if you engage a young person, somebody's 14, 15, 16, 17, and it's interesting, and here's the paradigm shift, is the kind of questions we talk about them. In other words, we talk about their life is still in front of them, as opposed to, what did you see, hear, taste, touch, or smell today that gave you pleasure or gave you joy? In other words, what made you smile, babe? What made your heart glad? In other words, what all of the things that put you in the present moment. We're afraid to ask those questions. I mean, I learned that very young with my son Zach. He'd come home from school and I'd say, "What did you do at school?" See, there it is.
Yeah.
Even as a parent, what did you do at school? Well, you know, what's the answer a kid's going to give you? Nothing, or I don't know, or huh? I mean, that's it's a quick conversation. So very early, I'd ask Zach those what did you see, hear, taste, touch, smell things questions.
Oh, did you?
Lord. Oh, good Lord! He'd go on for a long time about any of those things.
Do you remember? Of course, you remember our dear friend, the Presbyterian pastor Ben Patterson, and his question. You remember his question every time you encountered him for the first time when you go into his office? Do you recall that?
No, I don't.
His question was, "How is it with your soul?"
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
I've always thought that was a fabulous question. How is it with your soul? How is it with your inner life? What's going on? What are you seeing? What are you doing with your inner life? Rather than how you doing? Good to see you. You know, he just jumped right into the middle of the mess.
Yeah, so there's a culture with shamans, and the diagnosis questions they have. If someone is experiencing, and they're not sure what it is, but they're down, they're emotionally down, they're under a weight of some kind that might have physical manifestations. And do you know what their first 4 diagnosis questions are? Are you ready? When did you quit singing? When did you quit listening to music? When did you quit hearing stories? And when did you quit the comfort of silence?
And the answer to that is, when did I begin any of those?
Yeah, and the extraordinary irony is that, but with regard to, say, music, I mean, there are times when we see it, but we walk right times when it happens to us, or even when the times silence or stories happen to us, we walk right by them.
Yeah. And look what Garrison Keillor did with storytelling. He took it just became a national phenomenon because he was such a tremendous storyteller that we would stay tuned and listen to his whole silly show just so we could hear his story.
Yeah, and the story, what is interesting about the story is not necessarily the plot or where the story's going. Those weren't what his stories were about. What's interesting about the stories are the very tactile or visceral kind of truths. In other words, the specific encounters that happened, and which all of those things put us in the present moment.
They do. They make us think about the present moment. And they make us think about who we are internally. And in the story, how do the characters in the story relate to our various characters we have in our makeup? Because we're all made up of several characters, and how each of those relates to one or more of our characters, and that does indeed impact our lives and causes us and not causes us, but assists us in considering what's important in life.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I just, boy, I'm just thinking because I'm going to see it for a second time tonight, so I'll publicly promote Ed Norton's newest endeavor, Motherless Brooklyn. It is exactly that. It is genius storytelling, and that we can relate to a person with some disabilities. He has Tourette's and he's OCD, and he's a detective. But you can really relate with his problems and what he wanted everybody to see. We all have those kinds of problems. It's not just, they're maybe not quite as intense as his, but that was his goal. It's for us to relate to that. I highly recommend that film. I'm going again tonight to see it. But what I want to continue with today is, as I was reading through your book, I really liked the 3 sections and found that they prompted me. I'm going to now read your book as a daily devotional. I'm going to read each chapter as a devotional. And the sections, I think, are so pertinent, and they're exactly the questions or direction. I think something on mindfulness, finding grace, and the power of the present moment. I think they sort of bolster that concept. And the sections are: 1, first section is born to savor. Second one is what gets in the way, and it concludes with today I choose to honor. These are 3 of the most inviting topics to me. So what do you think we attempt to devote the remaining of our conversation today focusing on these 3 concepts?
Go for it.
Okay, so to begin with, I so agree with your premise that we are born to savor, and yet I am curious how you came up with and how you support such a countercultural, to American culture at least, a countercultural conclusion, because it seems that Americans are not born to savor but to succeed.
No, it has nothing to do with what we're born with. We're taught to do that. Abram Heschel is a Jewish rabbi. Heschel said we teach our children how to weigh and measure. Perhaps we should teach them awe and wonder. And I agree. And it's an interesting thing. You see, let's just go very practical here. Because I love to cook, right?
Right.
And there are times that even you and I have been in the kitchen back in the past when you would love doing kitchen stuff. And when you're involved in the kitchen, everything there is about savoring.
Yes.
It's about taste, but it's not just about the food. It's about just the activity of it and creating it and the ingredients. And your hands are in it. It's in the present. And there's conversation, so the relationship, and there's all kinds of things that are going on. It's very in the moment. This whole thing about, let's buy a food, let's buy a meal, and don't worry, you don't have to cook. Okay, fine, do that. But this endeavor, so you're in the moment. Now, what's fascinating is there's a temptation in our mind then to go, instead of the awe and wonder, which is just dive into it, is to weigh and measure. In other words, now we have to evaluate it. Is this a worthy thing or an unworthy thing? And that's where we trip ourselves up. It's not to say that things can't be different or get better, but you can't move on until you love the moment you're in. That's the savor part.
I think cooking is just a fine example because there's so much of your body involved in that. There's so many of your senses, especially the sense of touch and smell. You think it's just taste, but it's my favorite part of cooking was chopping. I loved
100%. Yeah.
I love chopping.
I love the sound of the knife on the board. I love the fragrance of whatever I'm chopping. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're making, and then when you add spices, it's not a quarter teaspoon. It's after you've done this for a while, it's what you feel is right and what tastes right and what smells right about it. Yeah,
so
that's
the thing about savoring is not just the fact that it's happening. There's a very important thing here, and that is that we have to give ourselves permission to savor. Yes, I'm wired to do it, but I need to give myself permission because there's something not just in me, but in my culture that wants to rein that in.
And wants it to make it a accomplishment endeavor. A contest.
Yeah.
Well, like there's not any TV shows on that.
Well, see, that's precisely the point. Look at what these TV shows are predicated on. It's like you have to win something rather than just savor something. And, I do retreats, as you know, for a living, or groups of people that are gone for you're there for 2 or 3 days. And it's fascinating that I'd say right up front, when you go home, people are going to ask you to evaluate your retreat. I said, just think about that for a minute. You're here to have time just to be grounded and to be with yourself, but now you have to evaluate it. That's just
it is not just counterintuitive; it's counterproductive.
It messes with everything about why you're there. So immediately you're thinking. In other words, you begin to not give yourself permission to put both of your hands in the dough.
Yes. Yeah, boy, I tell you, cooking, that really got me. I think that's a very helpful. Do you have any other helpful activities? I know, as I said early, that this is not a how-to, but a why-to. But for example, to help our listeners understand things that they can do. What else? I mean, for you, it's gardening, but what about those of us that live on a 4,000 square foot plot of land? There is no such thing as gardening.
That's completely untrue, Charles. I have driven in parts of Orange County, and I don't even have to go down to Laguna or to any part of the beach, but I've driven parts of Orange County where I see the sunrise or sunset, mostly the sunset. Sunrise, I can see it when it shines over coming through, and I see it, and the sky is magnificent.
Yes. That is true. We do have thanks to our.
I'm just saying, and so you need to literally pull off the road. The freeway should be empty during that time. You should. One of the things is the garden. The garden is much bigger than some place that I own where I grow things. The garden is where we get to walk around and where we get to savor nature.
But it's difficult, Terry. I'm going to speak for my listeners because I know they're thinking the same thing. It's difficult because we walk around tiny boxes. Everything looks the same. All the homes are the same. The streets are the same. The trees are all planted in a certain row, and they're all, according to community, the rules of the association, and all the houses have to be the same color. It's sort of like a ton of the same thing over and over, and I find there is little to savor. You really must make a conscious effort in places like where I live, a conscious effort at finding external pieces or external parts of my life that I can savor. A sunset, yes. I can tell you one time my son was about 5 years old. I pulled the car over in Laguna Beach and took a look at that sunset, and I said, son, look at that. Can you believe that? And he was very young, 4 or 5, maybe 6, I don't know. And to this very day, he will tell me, Dad, look at that sunset. But it was just one example. That was just one example. I didn't do that frequently.
And I would say to the people in your neck of the woods and there are other places like that, and that's one of the reasons I don't live there anymore.
So you're saying we all need to move to Vashon Island?
No, but I'm saying you have to be very intentional about things like that. You do, and that's why I am in awe of Central Park. Central Park is sanity for Manhattan because it gives a place where you are nuts for whatever, But for those few minutes that you're walking or doing whatever, you're literally, this is the life.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, but this is really important, is that this is the life, that groundedness that I have in my garden or in my cooking or whatever. That is now with me, so that when I walk back into those parts of my life that are a little bit more uneven, now I have, that gives me capacity.
Okay, I'm seeing we're already moving into point number 2 is what gets in the way. And my producer is suggesting that we take a brief break before we move on to that. But let's move on to get in the way. And we'll close up a bit on Born to Savor, because I still have a question there. So hang in. Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges with the next chapter with Charlie, and I want to welcome everybody and our guest Terry Hershey, and we are talking about Terry's latest book, which is titled This is the Life, subtitled Mindfulness, Finding Grace, and the Power of the Present Moment. And we are in the midst of discussing his three sections of the book: Born to Savor, What Gets in the Way, and Today I Choose to Honor. These are concepts for understanding this mindfulness, presence, and the grace to find that. The last question I have on Born to Savor. I can't help but think there's somewhat of a DNA or biological aspect to that. Am I getting too technical, or is there some sort of word DNA for this that you've thought about?
No, it is DNA. Tell me what you say, and you know this in sports. It's in sports, or when people are out hiking or working. What do you say to people? It's hot. What do you tell them to do?
In sports, what do I tell them to do?
Drink a glass of water. In other words, hydrate. If you're not hydrated, you will break down.
Right.
See, because it's in your DNA to be hydrated. It's the same emotionally. It's in your DNA to be emotionally hydrated.
I love that.
In other words, there are so many things that take away. And when you're dehydrated, what happens is your capacity to think is diminished. Your capacity to react is diminished. Your capacity to function is diminished. Your capacity to produce is diminished. The possibility of illness is expanded. So this is about emotional or spiritual hydration. It's in our DNA to be hydrated.
Isn't this way of thinking, this present moment thinking, isn't this part of cancer therapy?
Yeah, in many places it is, and this is what's interesting to me, because very often that's why the stuff that gets in the way. Our temptation, using the old paradigm of, what did you accomplish? Our temptation is, we'll just get that stuff out of the way. In other words, here, take 2 pills and go home. However, in the This is the Life paradigm, instead of doing that, you actually want to reinforce what's in the DNA. So my doctor can say, here, you've got plaque on your arteries, for God's sake, you're an old man, take these pills and go home. Or he can say, there's a pill, or he can say, exercise, sleep well, eat well. In other words, hydrate.
Yes, and that's part of living in the present then.
Saying what you're saying about cancer therapy.
Yeah.
Is that there are so many ways that we can do this what they do is they reinforce our DNA.
Okay. All right. So we've got Born to Savor. I think I can buy that. I can buy that. I am. Boy, you really got me with the cooking metaphor. That is so natural, and for those people who are listening that have cooked, they certainly get that. But we have, according to your second section of the book, we have several obstacles to that. What gets in the way is the official title of the section. But there are so many things that I see getting in the way that I talked about earlier about living in a tiny box community, which we're building a park, by the way, Terry. We're building a park in my neighborhood. Isn't that great? Yeah, it's all for tennis, baseball, basketball. There's not a tree in the neighborhood. So yeah, get that damn tree out of the way. I can't park a car there.
I know. It's a park, but it has to meet certain requirements, having nothing to do with park.
Yes. So that's the park I get to walk to. Oh, now, which I think I will find joy in the sense of the presence by watching children having fun.
Right.
If they are indeed allowed to do that in Little League Baseball. I'm not sure that's part of Little League Baseball's goal anymore.
Well, you would appreciate this, obviously, because you were involved in raising your son up through that, and there's some pretty skilled players. But my theory is always that Little League is not really for kids; it's for parents.
It's for angry parents.
Yeah.
angry parents that failed as a kid at sports.
You give them a bat and a ball, and they're fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I've had umpires used to tell me, if you just fired coaches and umpires and let kids go out and divide into two teams and play each other, they'd have a blast. And they'd make up rules and they'd do fine. Yeah, they'd be just fine. There's a quote I wanted to use in your book that I thought has to do with this, and it's by I don't know if I pronounced his name right, Tom Bazeltis.
Yeah, I don't know either, but yeah.
Okay, but quoting him, he says, "They tell us to live one day at a time as if we had a choice. Of course we live one day at a time. Some of us That's from the movie. No. What movie?
The movie where Meg Ryan is an alcoholic, and yeah.
Okay. So, again, I'll quote that. They tell us to live one day at a time as if we had a choice. Of course we live one day at a time. Some of us are just more aware of it. So, Hirsch, why are so many of us unaware of the wonder of presence?
Because we, have forgotten that we have the capacity. 2, we haven't given the permission to embrace that as a value to whatever the day is. And 3, because we haven't used the paradigm switch question. In other words, asking ourselves. Just like we always sort of ask ourselves, what did I just do, or what just happened to the day, or the way we just unpack it with whoever at the end of the day. The paradigm helps us unpack it in different ways. In other words, if we have different kind of questions about how we unpack it, then we notice different things. Our questions tell us what to notice.
I like that.
In other words, even if it's as simple as Charlie, this is Pam talking, Charlie, go to the store, pick up blah, 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 blah. You get home, the question can be, did you pick up blah, 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 blah? Or it can be, did you see anybody at the store that you knew? Did you see anything in the store that you thought you wanted to buy because it made you remember something else? In other words, there's so many other questions to ask.
Yeah, I guess. That seems, if my wife asked me that, I'm not sure how I'd respond.
I would ask you, Well, there were several ways that I was, because once I would get to know you as a friend, there are several ways I can ask you that I will keep pushing it in terms of the fact that there's something about the experience that puts you in the present.
Yeah, I need to. You know, it is very difficult. It is very difficult to live fully in the present when it's so filled with duties and responsibilities, because all I can think about is duties and responsibilities. When I go to Trader Joe's, I don't notice anything. I have my list, and I'm just asking people, where is the this and where is the that, because I can never remember. And that's all I'm focusing on.
I'll give you, I push back on that completely. Because when I go to Trader Joe's, I have a list. I do. But that list is only part of my experience there.
Not mine, man.
I'm just telling you, well, then we're going to convert you.
We're going to convert you. It's like when my son and I used to go shopping for his mom for Christmas.
Yeah.
And she would give us a Christmas list, and we would do that shopping in about 2 hours. We called it MOM, Men on a Mission. And our mission was to buy those things and get the hell out of those stores and then go play some baseball.
And that partly is fine, because they go play some baseball. But the question is, how do I practice this is the life? How do I give myself permission to be men on the mission, where at least partway through that I smiled about something and had a joke with my son?
Well, there are times when you have moments. There are moments that you have in all of that, even in those times which have already been slated for something else, objectively. That's really a good observation, because the Men on a Mission, just even that in itself was fun for us, and we would.
That's my point.
We would have fun.
It gave you pleasure and joy. So the fact is, it was a bonding experience for you and Austin. That puts you in the present moment. So your theory has just broken down completely.
Okay, next problem, next issue. So, and I read another issue in your book that really resonated with me. That is an obstacle to getting in the way of mindfulness and living in the present. And I keep forgetting this. Finding Grace. Let me look at the book. Oh, Finding Grace. That's it. Just it. Finding Grace. And that is fear. Fear gets in the way because we have this set of expectations of us that we feel we have to perform, and if we don't perform, it is very vulnerable, and we are going to be judged or rejected by other people if we don't. And so our mindset is just so set upon achieving the task at hand that we don't see anything else at all, because we know there's somebody looking over our shoulder evaluating our performance.
Yeah, and that's a big, and the word for me is enough. In other words, I have to understand the power of enough. Is it enough? And, it's easy to just then say, well, then how can you ever be, let's just, you take it to sports, or you take it to music, or you take it to, even as a speech maker, people say to me, but Terry, don't you want to be the best speaker you can possibly be in this moment with this group of people? And
No.
Of course, yes. But if that's my motivation, I am never going to be the best Terry.
I totally detest and it's unfortunately I've heard it in religious environments that your goal is to be the best you can be. I don't want to be the effing best me that I can be. That's too much work. It requires an effort that I just am not prepared to make, because I don't think it's worth it. I've used so many times, the listeners are probably sick of it, but that old B.B. King quote where he was talking to blues guitarists and he says, don't try to be a great one, just try to be a good one.
Yeah, and to me, I say just try to be a grounded one. In other words, just try to be here. Because that's the whole thing. I mean, let's go to sports. Golf. Golf is my sport, because golf is what the truly spiritual people play.
Yeah, I see that all the time in golfers. That's
yeah, you mean because the word God is mentioned frequently. Frequently, yeah. But the thing about golf is that there's so much stress and anxiety from somebody learning to, quote, be the best or have the best swing. But you have to start with the swing you've got. Can you be okay with the swing you just took? And that's a big deal. Can you be okay with that swing? Because you can't change anything until you love what you got.
You know, do you know, I'm sure you've realized, but how radical you were. This is radical talk. This is radical change. I mean, when you say paradigm shift, this is more than a paradigm shift. This is a who you are shift.
You know what? One of my fun things to do. This is back to golf again. But I'll if somebody's asking me to give them help on their golf game, I'll walk them around for a round, and I'll say, throw the scorecard out. We're not keeping score. And they say, what? No, we're not keeping score. Because you have this mindset about what you're supposed to shoot. I said, let's talking about, this is the life, power of the present. I want you to, and now you're going to have 80, 90 swings, and probably 5 or 10 of them will be okay. I want you to celebrate those 5 or 10. So, before each shot, tell me what's going to happen with the shot, and they'll tell me. And it will either not go or where they want it to go. If it goes where they think it said they wanted to go, et cetera, and they hit their shot, I'll say, okay, mark it. Because if you have 5 of those at the end of the day, by God, you had a great day. It's a paradigm shift. In other words, celebrate who you are right now. In other words, the irony is, as long as they were thinking I should have shot 75 and I shot 90, they're not going to celebrate the 5 shots they hit that were brilliant. They're going to miss them completely.
How does this concept keep in line with the great philosophers of the world that are so character oriented and so development of character, and there's an evaluation of development of character, so it's not production in the American dream sense, but it is enhancing our internal performance. How does living in the present integrate with those thoughts? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, that's the whole point. The thing about character is you're embracing who you are right now and your capacity to be that best you right now. And I know you may not like that quote, best you right now, but by best you, I mean the one that embraces this Terry. That's what I'm talking about. The capacity to embrace it.
Yeah, I can live with that. The best you thing always seems to be so it's that idea that you're never it's an unachievable goal.
Well, that's not the best you. That's the you that someone else has for you. That's not the best you for you. That's the best you from someone else. And who asked them?
So what do you think are the major obstacles in getting in the way of living this is the life?
The easiest one is distraction, because we live in a world where distraction is everywhere. We're more distracted than we've ever been in our history. So that's the easiest one. Then we have the narratives or the scripts from our upbringing. Mine is shame and perfection, that you have to be a certain way, or if you're not a certain way, you're screwed up, etc. You're messed up. And the other one is that, if only in someday, which is the Orange County thing, what I call it the Orange County thing, but it's really an American thing. If only in someday I will have the job I'm supposed to have. The irony is, young people like my son's age, your son's age, they're going to have 8 or 9 jobs in their career. And yet we still have this if only and someday, you know.
That is so true, that the if only and someday and when I get, then.
I want to do a funeral for somebody, and I want to do the eulogy. As you know, my friend always said, "If only," and I said, "Well, it finally happened." If only. Well, here it is.
I'm not getting that. What am I not getting?
I'm just, if only this happened, then life will. Well, okay, if only finally happened, so life had.
Yes. So whatever it is, it is.
Whatever it is, it is.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, let's do this. We're running close out of time, but I do want to cover the third. Your intention with the third section of the book. Today I choose to honor. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's about where do I invest myself. I really say this. Don't tell me what you believe. I mean, I always people ask me what I believe. Don't ask me what I believe. Look at my calendar and my bank account. Then you'll know what I believe. My checkbook. In other words, what do I honor? Tell me where I invest myself. And I'm not talking money investment. I'm talking about who I am as a person. Where do I invest myself? And when you walk around my garden with me, I'm not going to tell you what's pretty and fine and best. I'm going to tell you what amazes me. That's where I invest myself. I want to invest myself in this stuff.
So this is about intentionality?
It's about intentionality, yeah. Tell me what your intentions are, because I don't care what people want you to do. I don't care what you should do. And the irony is, we invest ourselves sometimes in places that they're contrary to what we say in our head. So that's one of the things is it's freeing for people to see, wait a minute, I don't want to invest myself there. I want to choose this. I choose to.
And what's really unfortunate, Terry, is that we have so many options, so many blogs, so many podcasts, all informing us of what we need to invest our time, our energies, and our emotions in, that people that are genuinely trying to live a full life, a present life, a mindful life, can end up overwhelmed by opportunity.
Overwhelmed. 100%. Yeah.
So how do I pick and choose? What does it take days of meditation? Does it take retreats? What does it require for me to?
The beginning of that story I told about my hospice chaplain. She wants to know my long-term goals. She didn't even ask me, did I love the patient I was with today? So it starts with that first question. So fine, we'll unpack where you want to go and be and do. That's fine. But tell me today, in your work, what made you glad to be alive? Tell me today, in relationships you had, what gave you joy? In other words, unpack with me times when you were alive and fully alive and in the present. Embrace those.
It's really consistent with, you use the quote of Jim Elliot, wherever you are, be all there.
Yeah, be there now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's really critical, because I have a habit of, even when I am driving to a place that I am extraordinarily familiar with, like today when I'm driving to the podcast, and I was driving to the club to do the preparation for the podcast, I put it on my navigation.
Yeah.
Why do I need to nav where I've gone every day for 130 days? Yet I just want to know how long it's going to take. Okay, it's 7-minute drive. Okay, I'm fine. But why do I find that necessity to measure and to have pre-measured for me so I can put that out of my mind.
Right. I mean, the point of any of this is undoing things that block. That's the key. Instead of giving ourselves grief for it, is what choices do we make to undo it?
Yeah, this is really a game of subtraction, not addition. 100%.
100%. Take a layer off, and you'll see something you forgot was there.
And it seems to be genuine, in Richard Rohr's terms, genuine second half living.
Yeah, that's actually true. That's actually true. I mean, you asked about why do we have to be old to see it, but I mean, we might as well admit it. There's something about something that comes with age that you see something. That doesn't mean we don't see it when we're young. I honor it when people see it, and I want people to see things when they're young. But yeah, I agree.
Let's close with this. There's and I'll close with my own story that I read in Travels with Epicurus by Daniel Klein. And I've probably used it. Well, I know when I interviewed Daniel Klein, we did it, and it's talking about an old Greek man who's sitting on a rock near the ocean, sipping well, it's not a glass of ouzo, but it's some sort of container for ouzo, like a shot glass of ouzo, and he's in the middle of a very disheveled olive garden, and a very rich Italian American came and asked the old man, "Who owns this olive garden?" And the old man says, "Well, I do." And he says, "Well, why don't you, olive oil is very expensive and very profitable in the United States. Do you realize if you were to clean this up and hire some people to work for you, you could really make a lot of money from this, and when you make the money, you could hire people to do all of your work, and you could have a nice home, and then you could do anything you want to do. Anything that you want to do, you would have the funds and the means to do whatever you want to do." And the old man looked at him and he said, "You mean like sitting on a rock, drinking ouzo, looking at the ocean?"
Exactly. You mean like what I'm doing right now?
Yeah. You mean like what I'm doing right now. Terry.
Yeah, that's the story.
I love your book. I love your concept. It is. I really wanted to throw some challenging things out because I know it's so difficult for us because we have, in your second point, what gets in the way. We have so much getting in the way, especially the cities and urban areas. But it's true in every area. It's true in every area. But we just have so many distractions, as you've called them, that we do need to subtract instead of adding things. We do need to subtract.
Yeah, I agree.
Great job, Hirsch. Thanks for spending time with me today. And I do want to encourage our listeners to check out your inspirational post called Sabbath Moment that can be found at terryhershey.com. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And be sure to check us out at our website, thenextchapter.life, that has all of our podcasts and all of our blogs and some videos with you and I, some old videos that you and I did that are still quite pertinent on that. And so until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.